I'm here today with Zach Hadley, former intern, and Zach is in the process of buying his first home. And so we want to do a video today where we talk about how to get ready to become a homeowner. So let's use AI and explore AI and get tips and tricks, plus your experience, Zach, and how you've done it.
Sure, that sounds good. Let's get started. As Mayor Johnson said, we're going to use AI to figure out how to purchase our first home. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Gemini. We're going to take a look at what all Gemini tells us we should do if we have no idea where to start. So let's say I don't know where I'm going to start. I want to buy a home. I live in Somerset, Ohio, and I'm making minimum wage working food after going to college, and I still want to pay off some college debt. How can I make all this happen? How can I make it work? And let's start with that as our example. And we're going to ask it, how do I buy a home if I don't know where to start? That's exactly what our prompt's going to be. So let's see what it says. How do I buy a home if I don't know where to start? So it went ahead and gave us a couple ideas. It started with determining our budget, finding a real estate agent, starting the home search, making the offer, getting a home inspection, and closing the deal. Now, obviously, this is very rudimentary and it's much more complicated than that, but this is just a general outline of how you can do it. What we don't need is every single thing from A to Z in very, very fine detail. What we need is where we start. So the starting point is going to be the first thing that it told me about. And as a quick caveat down here, it has Ohio Realtor's Guide to Buying Your First Home. It's a link to that. And then Consumer Finance's Owning a Home Tool. So there's different things that you can use. It's like these might help you kind of point you in the right direction if you're curious about more. So that was nice to have. But we're going to start with determine your budget. So it's saying that if you want to figure out how much house you can afford, you need to figure out your budget. Based on your budget, you can figure out how much you could be pre-approved for and what that looks like. So I'm going to ask it about that. I'm going to say, please expand on point number 1. So we're still at the point where we haven't started yet, but we're trying to figure out how to take that first step and what that could look like. So as we look here, it says step 1, determining your budget is arguably the most crucial step in the home buying process, which I would agree with as someone who has gone through it and done it themselves. Now, this is going to tell you how much you can actually do and how much you should not do. What you need to consider is your income first and foremost, how much you take home gross and how much you take home net. Gross is before taxes, so you can't actually use that as your amount that you have. You got to look at your net. So your gross is great, and that's usually the number used to determine your debt to income ratio. However, you need to make sure that your net is what you can actually use to pay that. So what you're going to do is you're going to see how much you take home monthly, annually, all that, and break it out. Look at your expenses. How much do you spend? What does that look like? How much do you want to save for a down payment? Now, you can avoid PMI if you pay 20% at least for the down payment, but a lot of people can't afford that. So if you can't do that, you need to then factor PMI into how much you're going to spend for your home. Now, this isn't something that it really mentions here, but that is something to consider. It talks about DTI like I did a little bit up there, where it says that is going to be your debt to income ratio. Now, a lower DTI is a lesser likelihood of a default on your loan, so you want to have a DTI of 43% or lower. That is a general rule of thumb of you can't really go over that number, otherwise you're considered a higher risk and people won't want to lend to you as much. So you can take a look at that and say, yeah, I want to keep below this and keep within my means, make sure I'm not getting house poor, and I can afford it. Then you're going to get your pre-approval figured out, so you're going to go ahead and get pre-approved with everything, make sure that you can go through the steps and that nothing is flagged where it says, oh, you actually can't do it because this thing popped up and you're unable to buy a home. Affordability calculators are something you can use, and additional costs like maintenance. 2 to 5% of your home purchase is going to be closing costs, so that's important to keep in mind. As I mentioned too, maintenance, which it doesn't mention, that was just something that I added. You got to think about that as well. There's going to be maintenance, there's going to be upkeep of the house, things that you need to do. So keep that in mind as you do this and as you venture into home ownership. Again, we're just looking at a starting point. Let's say I make minimum wage in Ohio working 60 hours a week in food service. I live in Somerset, Ohio, and want to buy my first home for a reasonable price. What is the housing market in Somerset, Ohio looking like, and what is a reasonable price I can afford with that income? So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to see what's the going rate in the area that I live in. How much can I expect to spend on a home? And is how much I make enough? Is this even something I should be looking at? So let's see what it gives us. Now you can obviously always check these things, but it tells us that $10.10 is the hourly rate for the minimum wage in Ohio right now. So if you're working 60 hours a week, it says that you get $606 a week or $2,628 per month gross. This is before taxes come out. Then it says it's kind of a mixed bag for housing in Somerset, but you're going to look at the average home price of around $274,000, which I verified to be true. I looked and saw that, but we could ask it to show us examples. We can double down on that. So it's saying that prices have risen recently. significantly, up 12.7% over the past year, which is just true of the Columbus metropolitan area and surrounding areas. There's high demand for housing in the area, and it's a white hot market, so that completely tracks with what we've been seeing. And I live in the area, so I can definitely validate that that is true. And we want to make sure is that if you're hearing something or seeing something from AI, that it makes sense. This is something that you're seeing, and that's reality, and that it's not something that's very far-fetched and wrong, because it does get things wrong, so you need to always check it. But just telling you that that is correct and that is something that makes sense. So we're also going to see that it's going to give us affordable housing options and say, hey, based on your income, you need to budget for about 28% of your gross monthly income, which gets about $735 per month, which includes your mortgage, property taxes, and homeowners insurance. So with that, we're going to want to make sure that we can probably get to that 20% down payment so we can avoid PMI, so we have even less costs. So that way we can make sure that we can do this doing a minimum wage job. So as we look, we're going to see that there are different programs, FHA loans, USDA loans, all kinds of stuff. You can look at a condo, fixer uppers, different ideas. So it's just giving us a general background. So let's say I want to see what I would have to save to buy a $274,000 home in Somerset, Ohio for a 20% down payment per month over the next 5 years. Let's see what it says. So it's arrived at $913.33 per month, which is very, very high, and that might not be feasible. So let's quickly ask before we go any further. I make minimum wage and work 60 hours a week in Ohio. What is my net remaining pay each month? So we want an idea of how much our net is. So we're going to go ahead and scroll down and see what it's told us. So it's doing all this math, and it said, based on this information, we're going to estimate that you should have about $1,900 to $2,100 remaining every month. Now, I'm going to say, let's take the low end of that. So assume I only take home $1,900 per month. Please subtract out the savings goal for the down payment each month and tell me my remaining amount, and if it's feasible with a roommate to live on the remainder. Again, we don't worry about typos. That's completely fine. You can tell that it has a good idea of what I'm trying to say, and it generates what I need as a result. So it's already telling us we have about a little under $1,000 remaining each month, saying it's possible, but it's going to be really lean. So we're going to take a look at what this looks like. Shared expenses, how are we going to split it with a roommate, individual expenses, all that, unexpected expenses. So I'm going to say, with the remaining money left over each month, break down my budget if I had rent with a roommate in Somerset, Ohio, a car payment of $200 for an older car, food, utilities, internet, phone, and minimum student loan payments of $200 per month. So it broke it down for us based on the area we're in, and it says the average rent of a two-bedroom is around $800. Now, I have checked this out, and this is true for Somerset. Around that area, there are apartments going for that. Mainly, it also pulled from New Lexington and surrounding areas. It doesn't have a ton of those in Somerset because a lot of them are homes, but if you look at the general area geographically, this is true, and this does make sense. But you could also ask it, hey, show me some listings in the area where I can see this and validate and verify this, which we can ask it as well. And it says, based on all this, you're going to run a deficit of about $293.33. Now, that being said, $300 per person for groceries is a little bit high. You could probably get away with $200 if you're savvy about it and you're being smart with what you're eating and how much you're eating out and what you're getting. So I'm going to ask it to knock $100 off groceries, and I'm going to say, assume that I have two roommates. Assume I have two roommates to split rent with and subtract $100 from my monthly food budget. Am I still in a deficit? So it did pretty good overall, but it did not take out for us what we need to save for the down payment of 20%. So I'm going to ask it to do that. I'm going to say, please subtract the down payment savings goal for the month and see if the deficit remains. It immediately catches it forgot that. It says, you're right. I apologize for that oversight. And let's see what it generates now. So after doing that, it puts the down payment savings in. You are in the green or the black, depending on how you look at it, $5. you have $5 left over each month, which is extremely tight, however, possible. Now, let's say that we don't want to do it in 5 years. We can do a little bit longer. This gives us a little bit more wiggle room, and we'll assume in this time that we will get a raise, or maybe we'll work a little bit extra hours, or maybe we'll just go ahead and change jobs, do something else. But this is showing that on paper, this is possible. This is something you could do. Even though it is very, very lean, you always want to have some money left over, but the money that you're saving for the down payment is still money that you have. So that saved money is money that you can then say, if something happens, I can use that to get tires for my car if I need it, or whatever that looks like. So the 5 years is the goal time frame, but that's not necessarily something that you are held to super strictly. It's just showing that it is possible. It is something you could do and get yourself in a home. I think we've got a pretty good idea of what we could do for our budget, how much we could be looking to spend for a home in the area, how much our expenses could run us, how we could break those down, allocate them with how much we're making where we're at, and just different ideas in general. So what we're going to do is, just to double check, because I said in the past, please show me apartments for rent in the area for $800 or less. So I want to double check that it's actually telling me things that are true. So let's take a look. And right now, this is interesting. It's looking at my area. So it's not looking at anything in the area that we discussed, which is Somerset. I meant Somerset, Ohio, per my example above. And it quickly gets there. It says, sure, there are 13 rentals for under $800 in Somerset. You can find them here. Let's check it out. So it has some different places. Just want to quickly look at this. So Heath is close by, $750. Newark is also not far. Lancaster is also similar. So these are all about the same. Newark, Zanesville, Lancaster, Zanesville, all these are right around the area. As it said with home prices and how much it's going to price them at, similar with rent, here's similar areas and different ways that you can look at this. This is a little start. What we're going to do is we're going to go through this and we're going to see, how can I get to purchase a home from starting and using AI? This is how you lay the foundation for this. You now have the groundwork, you have a budget figured out, you have feasibility of that, you've checked it, made sure that it makes sense to you, and you figured out, you know what the asking price is for a lot of homes in your area, how much you need to save over 5 years to get to your goal, even if it's ambitious, working minimum wage, working a little bit extra, and going from there. So I hope this has been helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.